Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Tuesday, August 6th, 2024. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and Change. Kind of an interesting show for you today. The Dean is on vacation, believe it or not. The Dean actually takes vacations very, very rarely, but he's there in Georgia with all his grandchildren and enjoying life, we hope. Got an ad for you first, and then Mark Porter will be here, and we are going to take all of your questions. Heavy on the questions today, so if you have any, throw them in the live chat, whether you are on Bucknuts, YouTube, whether you are on Twitter or the Book of Face, throw it in there. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do that so you make sure this gets delivered right to you. First, I've got to tell you about our sponsor of the day, Factor Meals. If you're a food snob and didn't like TV dinners growing up like me, Factor Meals is something else. Warmer, sunnier days are calling. Summer's here. Fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals in time for summer thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make your day delicious from breakfast to dessert. Stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. Head to factormeals.com/Bucknuts50. Use that code, Bucknuts50, to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code Bucknuts50 at factormeals.com/Bucknuts50 to get 50% off your first box, 20% off your next box while your subscription is active. Quite a great deal. All right. Mark Porter is here. Mark, thank you for not taking vacation at the same time as the Dean. That will be a lot more pressure on your guy here. But we are going to take a ton of questions today. And all the good stuff we can get to. Any questions you have about the state of Ohio and football players in that state, it's a fine state. They play fine football there. Anything you have, this would be the day to shoot that out. We can handle pretty much everything, but your Ohio-based recruiting questions are the 3-1 fastball for the Grand Poobah. But we are going to go through this. There's some recruiting stuff we aren't going to answer just because that's more Bill's wheelhouse. And I will go from there. But let's start at the top with the one question, and I will take this. David Sanders recruitment decision. All right. Obviously, we've talked about David Sanders ad nauseum. His commitment is coming up, I believe, in about a week, 11 days. Tom Lloyd, the national writer for 24/7 Sports, has been all over this, as well as our local guys. He gets the sense that Tennessee is in the lead, slightly possibly over Ohio State. Nebraska also in the mix. I think it's going to come down to Ohio State or Tennessee, like everybody said. I don't really have a tremendous vibe on this. We've talked about this too. This is not going to be an NIL decision. I believe both Tennessee and Ohio State have the franchise tag put on Mr. Sanders, so he's going to get plenty. But this is not one I think you're going to get a lot of information on heading down the stretch. He's kept it pretty tight so far. Tennessee and Ohio State is not even a usual battleground, so some of the sources who do both won't be able to lean on each other. So I think wishful thinking is the only thing you can go with at this point. Anyone who tells you they know, unless their last name is Sanders, I would say they are probably fibbing. So, Mark, you've provided a video. We did an offer evaluation for him a week ago, and hopefully that can turn into a commitment evaluation. Don't take too long on this because it's repetitive, but your thoughts on Sanders as a prospect were obviously off the charts.
Yeah, and I'm the first one to try to be level-headed when we evaluate and not, give everyone these high ratings or straight to the NFL. But he's the exception. I mean, he's probably one of the best offensive linemen we've ever seen, just athletically, the type of lineman he can be. And we even watched some historical film of Taylor Decker and, other guys to kind of see where he rated of all-time guys. And he's right up there. So we want him. And we've created plenty of hype, and I hate to add to that and put the cherry on top, but that's what we're dealing with here. And that's why he's the first question out of the gates, probably on every podcast we've done for the last couple of weeks. Really excited if you do land him. I mean, that is, something to, watch him. Is he plug and play, as I put in my thing? I mean, will you see him on the field next week or next year, week 1? Possibly, and if not, he's rotating in there, I think. And I think if he's not, something drastically went wrong. So let's count our blessings here and hope we get him.
The only reason I could see him joining the team and not getting a lot of playing time earlier maybe be his weight. But that's, technique-wise and, just everything else, well, I think he'd do a fine job.
After seeing the Armstrongs, what they've done in a summer of adding weight, I don't think that'll be the issue. But I have thought he is a lighter. If you wanted to find a criticism, Dan, that would be the only one. He's a little lighter, but he's svelte. I think most college coaches said, if you could give me a lineman that I didn't have to take the baby fat off of or the little chub here and there and just give me the stripped down version, I'll take it from there. I'll put the weight on the right ways. But regardless, when you're just looking, if we watch that tape 20 times to try to find knocks on him, it's pretty tough. The knock is the competition. He looks like an NFL lineman is back playing high school football, and the competition looks inferior.
My guess is David Sanders in a high school environment would have a very difficult time finding suitable competition on a weekly basis, regardless of the private school or academy he played at. He's going to be the best bigger fella on the field at all times. Kind of like your high school kid who's 6'9" in basketball and just doesn't play against there's just not that many 6'9" guys out there until you get to college. But we are very optimistic. Also a great kid too. If you ever hear him interviewed and stuff, one of the factors in his decision is where he's going to go to medical school. So he's not just bigger and faster than us. He's smarter than us too. Very impressive. Let's hope. We can only hope. We'll probably end up saying this a couple more times on the pod. All right. There was another good question in here for Mark. Mark from Garen Eggleston. Who is the player in Ohio you want to see make the biggest jump in their senior year? So that would be Ohio's class of 2025. We've already obviously got a few guys from Ohio in the fold. Who do you think could make that jump and maybe get on the radar, or someone who could push it over the line?
Yeah, and I think we're talking about, and this happens every year, as we get into the playoffs this season, there's some players that pop up that get hot, and Ohio State has offered guys like that in the past. You may have to take a commitment from somewhere else to get this player. You would hope it's a Justin Hill or Trey McNutt halfway through the season. You get them to one, stay home. I've always been a fan of Tucker Caddis as an offensive lineman. He's committed to Kentucky right now. But boy, is he a road grader. If he put out some great film, he could make some noise. Kentrell Reinhardt was a Mr. Football type nominee last year from Bishop Reedy. He's a tailback. He'll make a lot of noise with his stats. Quentin Simmons was a really raw receiver. I would compare him to Bud Pagan Miller. Like if you took either one of those guys, you were taking the developmental type that needed a little polish but had the raw underlying skills. Nolan Davenport was the tight end who moved offensive tackle for Massillon, and he's committed to Wisconsin, and his body's changing. And, he was down at the Ohio State camp, and they took a good look at him. Jackson Wiley is a receiver, but I think the ship may have sailed there. You got to kind of think of who would pop up for Ohio State. What did they need? Some of their positions, these guys could pop up, but they may not need them. At Ohio State, they may be full. So as I look at some of these names, it's kind of the horses we talked about, for the last year or so that didn't quite make it, that there still may be something there. I really thought Tyler Kielmeyer from Westerville South High School, who's a receiver that has turned into a tight end, who could even be an offensive lineman. His dad is basketball tall, maybe 6'7", 6'8". I thought he was one of the better developmental players in Ohio. Something like that could really burst onto the scene senior year. But I think what we're probably really looking at is that late run in the next season, and you kind of see someone pop up. And, I think we're pretty full. If Bill was here, I think he'd be talking about our scholarship counts right up against the wall, and it's down to 3 or 4. So getting someone in this last class is a little tricky, but there's a handful of names to think about if you're out on the road yourselves and you're watching games.
All right, there was a great question in here. We're going general. Who is this one? All right, we'll get to it. Josh Petty is more of a Bill Kurlick question just because he's more out of state, and I don't get a tremendously great vibe on that one from what I've heard. It's more of a Florida State deal there. So we will keep an eye on that. All right. Next question we are going with is has Justin Fry made any more offers to Ohio linemen in 26? Who is a viable offensive lineman in 26? I've often said this, and I'm pretty thankful of the way things are going. The Armstrong brothers are going to end up being a huge boon for us. Carter Lowe is a huge boon for us. Maxwell Riley is going to be a huge boon for us, hopefully. We rarely have Paris Johnson. We rarely have a great offensive line in Ohio without a few lucky bubble ups from the state of Ohio. And I think we've got that now, which is makes me very optimistic going forward. I wish we could seriously with the offensive line. I would take, if we could do it all from Ohio, I would do it. That's one of the few positions I would say that about, but you take it and run with it here in terms of 26.
Yeah, if Ohio's not producing offensive linemen, then we have a problem in the state. We're corn-fed and bred to be offensive linemen here. The 26 class is the Maxwell Riley class, Sam Greer, Conroy. And then people are talking about the kid from Miami Trace. They think Adam Guthrie could be a fringe guy. I think we've talked about J.J. Perez, the transfer from Lutheran to Glenville, who's a defensive lineman, offensive lineman. He's one of those bodies that they took a look at down at Ohio State pretty hard. As you go down that list of offensive linemen, there are kids that were sophomores that, like Pete Agilides from Bishop Watterson down there. He's 6'7", 270 pounds. You have to be looking at him in your backyard, and he's pretty good-looking kid. I mean, moves pretty well. So when you say guys, like the last question I got, who do I want to get out there and see? He's one of the guys that I think could be on the short list, I guess, as people to look at. I'm looking at just the list here of 26 offensive linemen and some other guys. Nathan Bernard could be looked at again at quarterback. I know that it's tough to be in that class, but he's pretty good in Ohio, and I think he's getting better. Where's the other lineman here I want to talk about? Kind of scrolling a list here. I know that's not good radio. Yeah.
Trotwood.
Okay, Jameel Atkins from Trotwood. When you look at him in person, he's the guy that looks like he's going to go play for an NFL team, but his film needed a lot of work last year. When you watch it, there's not a lot of it looks like a basketball player playing football, and his punch and some of that stuff, and the snap and the pop and the rawness is there in him. But like I said this to a college coach, that's the player in 3 years you could be wrong about. And I think with Ohio State, they don't have to go through that awkward process with the linemen. They'll have guys like him that are already kind of finished products, and they're not plug and play at Ohio State, but they're much closer than what Jameel is. He's going to need a redshirt year. He's going to need a couple years of practice squad time to get his reps in before I think he becomes what when the draft comes in 3 or 4 years. If he goes, we'll revisit this moment and say we said it here first, but he has a long way between here and there.
I would also say this. There's something called the transfer portal now. If he goes to school X, develops over 3 years, we can make a call and bring him in to fill a spot. So that's always
that is such a great point anymore. Like he could, I wouldn't be, if I was Ohio State, I would tap a MAC school as like my JV team and say, we may send a few guys your way or kind of help you get them, and you can have them for a couple years. But if they come out the other side, we better have first dibs on getting these guys out of your program. That's probably shady, but the whole MAC is going to be like that for Ohio State. The best, tackle every year in the MAC will probably get a good look from Ohio State and many other schools.
I think that's just the way it goes now. I think the MAC coaches also shed no tears. Those guys know what's going on. I mean,
it's almost like a trade situation. Give us your 10th best lineman, Ohio State, that you can't use, that's not developing. We'll take him in the MAC, and hey, we'll give you our finished product that'll probably help you guys out. And that's fair trade in that world.
Look, everybody in Ohio wants an offer from Ohio State. If an Ohio State coach tells you, hey, I think your best spot is Bowling Green, I'll bet you're more likely to end up at Bowling Green. So if you have a little communication with the coaches, and you know this, Mark, better than anybody, no job that I have had access to is more relationship-based than assistant football coaching. These guys tell each other everything, dude. See Michigan scandal. I digress.
Yeah, worse than an old lady's sewing circle.
Let me read our second sponsor, tremendous sponsor, Mando. Say it correctly, Mando. This is the best smelling whole body deodorant you can get. It goes everywhere, so you can be aggressive. Very, very good smelling, and we are very happy that they are our sponsors. Summer's here, school's out, sun's out. It's clinically proven to control odor for 72 hours. So for you real stinkers, and you know who I'm talking about, stops odor before it starts. American made, available in 4 cologne quality scents: bourbon leather, Mount Fiji, Pro Sports, and Clover Woods. That's awesome. Hiking, Mando. Volleyball, Mando. Beach, Mando. New customers get $5 off Mando's best-selling starter pack with code Bucknuts at shopmando.com. Okay, Mando starter pack, perfect for new customers. It comes with solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice, like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. Luckily, I have a discount code to help you get hooked on my favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. New customers, like I said, $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use code Bucknuts at shopmando.com. shopmando.com. All right, Mark. There was a question up there that I wanted to pop out here, and it was, who is the best football player you have ever seen in a high school football game?
Oh boy. I've been a Lattimore fan because the year I saw him in a couple of games where he went ballistic.
First name?
Marshawn Lattimore. Yeah, Marshawn Lattimore. I mean, it was pretty obvious on offense or defense that when he got the ball, it just seemed like there was a force field around him and nobody could get to him. And, when you see him in the NFL, it makes sense now how explosive he is. Boy, there were so many. Brandon Sane was my first ever cover for Ohio State, so that's where I go back, to I think 2006, 2007, like that. He was in a state championship game, and I thought he was lights out because he had that crazy speed, and every time he touched the ball, it seemed like no one could lay a finger on him. He was like the 100-meter champion that year. I'm going to hit search on my site here and just see what comes up as some of the top players I've ever seen, and maybe I'll have a few names that come to mind here. So.
I'll give you mine, and it's not from the state of Ohio. I cut my teeth covering high school football in the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and in Virginia, the Northern Virginia teams would often face teams from the beach. That's the Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads area in the state championship game. One time they Robinson High School from Northern Virginia, who I was covering, faced Lansdowne High School, who had a player named Percy Harvin on the team. In the state championship game against Robinson, when he was a junior, Harvin accounted for 476 all-purpose yards, rushing, receiving, kick returns, interception returns, and scored 5 touchdowns, all different ways. And then he made it back to the state championship game the next year and didn't do the same. But I have never seen a high school player like Percy Harvin. He wasn't even a great basketball player and still made it to the state championship game in Virginia with Scotty Pringle, who went to Penn State. But still, Percy Harvin By the time he was midway through his senior year, he wasn't even allowed to play in some games because there were riots in the crowds. And then he put on a show at the state track meet because it was near another event, and he could do both. So without question, for me, it's Percy Harvin. But I didn't cover a lot of Ohio guys.
Yeah.
Mark, the floor is yours.
The floodgates have now opened. Percy Harvin, when people ask that question, who's the best? The Percy Harvin type or cast off is usually the type of guy that wows you the most. And Eric Glover Williams, remember him?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Very Percy Harvin like. Jalen Marshall, remember him?
Sure.
Very Percy Harvin like. Sean Crawford was a guy that went to Michigan out of St. Edwards. Very Percy Harvin like. He played defense, whatever, but they're very quick and whatever. So I've pulled up my list, and when I say floodgates opened, I could never just say here's the one guy. Lattimore was on the top of this list or whatever, but Garyon Conley was a great corner to watch in high school. Jerome Baker was lights out as a linebacker at Benedictine. Like I would literally, I think, called him as an NFL guy. Like if he doesn't make it, yeah.
On Baker, I'm going to talk Baker for a second. Yep. Baker, I believe, in the state championship game, or in the state semis, they beat Joe Burrow. And
that might have been the Paris Campbell, Duran Grant group that beat Joe Burrow. And
I know
Joe Burrow's the next guy on this list. So.
Okay, but in the state championship game, Baker went to Benedictine, I believe. They eventually started. He just played quarterback, and they just snapped him the ball. That was their offense. They basically took him, and I remember when he committed to Florida, I remember telling Bill, this is the worst news I've heard. There is no more guaranteed of an NFL player to me than Jerome Baker that I saw in high school. I'm not saying he was going to be the best pro ever, but you want to talk about an NFL athlete in person, it was Jerome Baker. And you can tell Jerome is still playing football professionally. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's why we're doing this list. It brings – I needed this list to bring back that flood of memories because as soon as you hear the name, Justin Hilliard was a heck of a guy for a while. His high school highlight film, he was as good as any.
All right, hold on.
Denzel Ward.
Great, but I got to defer. This dude is right. Brass tacks. I don't know if people know who that is. Do you know who Bubba Chuck is? Bubba Chuck is Allen Iverson. Okay. Allen Iverson's junior year in Virginia, he was state player of the year in football and basketball. He was an option quarterback. He didn't play his senior year because he was incarcerated. But I digress. He is considered the best. Now, keep in mind, Virginia also had guys named Michael Vick and Ronald Curry around that time who were also legendary. But I'm telling you, if you want to have a fun 10 minutes, Google Allen Iverson High School, Bethel, Bethel. It will blow your mind. He used to get kickoff returns and run backwards and then run forward so he could give himself some space. Anyway, and he's skinny. Let me tell you something. He'd be the quarterback at Ohio State or Nebraska or something like that. Just watch. He was fantastic. And he'll tell you in interviews it was his favorite sport. All right, let's get this back to Ohio. I apologize.
Yeah, and my website probably started 2005, and the database I'm looking at now might be back to 2012. Beanie Wells was before me. Maurice Claret was before me. Orlando Pace was before me. Not that I haven't seen those films, so I can't say that I stood on a field with them. If there was a kid from Cincinnati Hills Christian Academy, Prince Salmons, in the class of 2016, that was like the biggest prospect in Ohio, and he went down south. But I don't think he ever where'd he go? He went to Auburn, and I don't think he ever developed. But that was a name that I remember thinking, great name. Liam Eichenberg and Drummond Jones from St. Ignatius, two guys that were pretty no-brainer, like as you're looking.
And wealthy. Draymond just got a second, maybe even a third contract, and he's kind of become like that hybrid defensive lineman that every team wants. You know what I'm saying? Can play. He's a 4-3 down lineman. Can play outside. Can play inside. Liam may not have been the NFL player that everyone was expecting out of Notre Dame, but he's gotten paid. All right, let's.
Joshua Perry, the 6'3", 220-pound tailback, was a freak in high school. Devon Bogart was a killer from
Perry
Glenville.
Was the original photo of the Mick getting you better or getting you bigger. Like Perry, when he first got to Ohio State, and then the picture of him 6 months later was like, good Lord. Oh, look at this. Brian
Taylor
Smith.
Decker. And then Chris Wormley. Who goes Chris Wormley that went to Michigan? He's Raven, I think, still. Yeah. I mean, he was a monster when you walked into the football stadium. Like a 747 landed on the 50-yard line, and it was him. His wingspan, he could touch from like tackle to tackle. So, Paris Campbell, there's so many guys as I scroll this list. Jake Butt and Mitchell Trubisky. I think the real recruiting nerds will remember a lot of these names, and I know we're getting deeper. That question, we could probably go to the end of the podcast with it, but, I'll let you get some other questions off as, I maybe calm down here.
Yeah, this is my guy here. He's right. I'm telling you something. Ronald Curry, if you go look it up, Ronald Curry may have been the best high school football player ever. Google that. I'm not kidding. It sounds crazy, and he ended up being a receiver, but you want to talk about a recruiting battle.
You know what other names I'm scrolling past that I am not saying is the busts. Oh, yeah. These highly rated players on my list where I look at them and say, boy, did he ever really end up doing anything? I don't know if he ended up.
It's one of those busts calling right now that I want you to give your name out.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know if yeah, there you go. They're like, please don't mention me.
Exactly.
But there's a few names here where I'm like, yeah, I remember him, but I don't remember anything after that.
I don't know this name. Tenarius Collins.
Boy, that's going back before me.
I tell you what, you could put together quite a book going around this country and just talking about the guys who didn't make it for one reason or another.
There's been some Mr. Footballs who have been in jail longer than they've been in college football. So we've had a run of guys there that, bad luck there. That's almost like the Madden jinx if you win the Mr. Football. It used to be for a couple of years there.
Football players don't struggle socially. Usually in a Division I situation, there's going to be a lot of distractions, so you got to have some discipline. Curtis Enos was the best I saw. I'll tell you a funny story. My son went to a workout with the local college and pro hoopsters, and he came back and said, Wes Enos is a beast. That's Curtis Enos' son, who's a 6'2" shooting guard and has the body of a superhero. All right, let's get to some more Bucknutter type questions. There's some recruiting stuff here that's really better for Bill, but I'll ask you this. Big competition that everyone's talking about now could be much ado about nothing, because I think a lot of the linebackers are going to play more than the last few years when it was really Eichenberg and Steele. The firm of Eichenberg and Steele, snaps-wise, was pretty heavy. I think Cody Simon's going to get a ton of snaps, but I think they're going to work C.J. Hicks and Sonny Styles in there. There's a lot of chatter about that. You covered them both extensively in high school. Neither one was a classic linebacker in high school, and there's been an adjustment period for both. What are your expectations? And I see this as more of a platoon situation. What are your expectations for those two? They should be high.
Yeah, going back to high school, you're right. They didn't project as inside middle linebackers at the time. You thought maybe more outside guys because they were a little longer, skinnier, a little stringier. Both were these freak athletes, and when they opened up and turn and run, that's what was special. I thought Hicks was the better football player coming out of high school. I thought he was a little, had a little more football to him. Sonny was still kind of the high upside guy that, boy, once he kind of fills this out and we see how big he gets, he could be the NFL, high draft pick. And you're starting to see them probably, like it's being reported, neck and neck. That wouldn't surprise me because I wouldn't want to have to make a call on which one of them is going to sit. So the good news about the Ohio State season is you have the first couple, other than that Oregon game, you have a few weeks where you can let these guys go and rotate them and kind of let the battle play it out and get some more information on them. But, it's going to be hard. Cody Simon might be the one that comes off the field for one of them after a while. You never know how this shakes out. And I'm someone who's looking at Arvell Reese and Gabe Powers and some of these other guys. You could be rotating 5-6 guys in there, until maybe you get to nut cutting time later in the year. Maybe the best guy starts getting, 75% of the reps and you kind of feel more comfortable with their body of work. But coming out of the gates, I think the answer is everybody. They're all going to be in there.
Yeah. And, we've heard this already, but one of Ohio State's strength is the depth. So you want to get that out there, but also to win the championship, now you got to play a few extra games. So you want to have those bodies be fresh, as fresh as possible. No college player has had to play this many games to win a championship before. And like we said, uncharted waters can be rocky. You know what I mean? So you've got to – we've been to enough playoff games where the guys we wanted in there were not in there at certain positions. Good Lord, running back in a playoff game, we had a walk-on wide receiver playing running back by the end of the game. You need as much depth as possible, and this season you're going to need it even more. So,
and I think there's no better way to recruit your own roster back than to have given them meaningful snaps early in the year, so they know, that they're a part of this team and what their future. You kind of got to show them the plan for them, and this is the time of the year where get these young guys in, because if you don't play them now, you know what they're going to think? If I can't even play in those first couple games, what am I sticking around here for? I'm better than this. And that's unfortunately the mentality of a lot of players. And that's why they're here, because they're dogs, they're alphas. But you got to give those alphas a bone. So this first couple weeks is largely about recruiting your own roster, putting smiles on their faces, and just what you said, long season. If we do need to dive into the Arvell Reese bag later in the year, we don't want to ignore him in those first couple of games.
Yeah, I do think Reese is going to play. And keep in mind, there's going to be injuries. It's a football team. No football team gets through the season healthy. I've said, if you're talking about the pros, if you could guarantee me right now, any NFL team is not going to have one injury all year, they're probably going to go to the Super Bowl. Or they got a good chance. I don't care who it is. So, listen, my favorite picture in the history of Bucknuts is when John Simon went to sign, and he looks like an 8-year-old at the picture with his dad. His dad is the biggest human being I've ever seen in a picture that didn't look like there wasn't a cartoon drawing. Unbelievable. Google that one. All right, Ryan. So this is a question, and I think this is what we all need to see here. Ryan Day has never been a rotational head coach. That all has to change in 2024. Keep in mind, Ryan is also good point by you. You guys are always good at picking out the one thing I got wrong. Yes, with a 5'8" quarterback who looks. I'm not taking another shot at that guy. All right. Yeah, I don't think the rotation is going to be as much of an issue going this forward. But the player, the rotation on the defensive line is Larry Johnson's. The rotation in the linebackers is the linebackers coach. It's going to be Laurinaitis. Day is not over their shoulder, I don't think, day to day, play to play, telling them who to play. I know there's a group mindset on that, but your position coach is the one who controls your snaps pretty much. That's something to keep an eye on. And you're right, brass tacks. Arvell Reese, another guy who's had to change positions, really. Didn't really have a natural position in high school. Is going to play a bunch. We've had some people tell us they think he'll be starting by the end of the year. Much stranger things have happened than that. And that's a guy you want to talk about looking the part. Arvell Reese is one of the first off the bus guys. I would hide behind him. All right. Jason Craven, I pray our running backs stay healthy. That's actually pretty interesting. Dave was all over the idea of the third running back, and I wasn't that concerned about it. But given the time we've had to use our third running back, I went back and watched some of, unfortunately, the Michigan game. Boy, it's amazing how many times we needed to get things done, and Jamonte Traynham was our running back over the last few years. And he was a really good player, but that's not who they would have chosen to be their running back in those times if everybody was healthy. So let's really just hope that Judkins and Trey can stay healthy this year. All right, we're going to finish with this. Mark, Brass Tacks asks, who is the top Central Ohio prospect?
Well, here are the names to throw in that bucket. Dwayne Galloway out of Marion Franklin has a ton of offers. We watched him at the Ohio State camp. Might not be Ohio State, but he's a heck of a player. Jaden Ricketts from Watkins Memorial did get the Ohio State offer. He's the burner. He's got the speed. Adam Guthrie from Miami Trace. We've talked about him a bunch. I think see Mika in there saying we got to offer him. We watched this film and broke it down and said, kind of a puppy dog on his way there, but he wasn't there yet, especially when you compare him to national offensive linemen. But this summer, I bet you he made a jump in the weight room. Kentrell Reinhardt from Bishop Reedy, just mentioned him. He was a Mr. Football candidate last year. Jackson Wiley at Olentangy. Jonathan Stevens is a great-looking play at Westerville North. We talked about Pete Aglitas at Bishop Watterson a little bit ago. Tyler Kleemeyer from Westerville South. Brennan Ward. I tell you what, if Tavian St. Clair wasn't in this class or, wasn't such a big name, Brennan Ward is a big, strong quarterback who's like a little less than Tavian St. Clair. Going to Kentucky, I think they got a steal there. Caden Gebhardt might be a player we're talking about as an Ohio State offer. I know among the college coaches circle, there's been some buzz about him. Levy Davis will put up big numbers, the quarterback at Olentangy. He's probably not big enough. I could go down this list a little further, but that's a pretty good list of names for Central Ohio, pretty good prospects, and I can't wait to see a couple of those guys this year, especially the kid from Watterson.
All right, I'm going to answer this question, and we're going to go because we could be here forever. Jim List, why is Tennessee favored to land David Sanders? So we'll begin with Mr. Sanders, and we will end with Mr. Sanders. First of all, I don't know that for a fact. I think the general consensus among the cognoscenti is that it's going to be Tennessee or Ohio State. He has visited Tennessee a ton, so that's why. Look, Tennessee is in the mix now. They got Nico Iamaleava a few years ago. They just got Brandon Faisal, their number one quarterback in the last over the weekend. They're recruiting big time, and they have a ton of dough, so it won't be an NIL issue. And they have produced good offensive linemen. I know we don't at Ohio State maybe see Tennessee as a peer, but it's a big-time program, and there's something about Tennessee that he likes. Let's just be honest with that. And also, Tennessee, Nebraska, Ohio State, that's not your normal trio for a guy. So he just may be a little bit different in the way he's choosing schools. We just got to be hopeful that during this last stretch, Ohio State can make that little push to get him over the finish line. Lord knows what this site's going to be like if they don't get him. That should be interesting. But we'll be back on Thursday. Have your questions ready for Thursday. Storm up, and the Grand Poobah and I will try and get to them. Appreciate you guys stopping by. Have a good one, Bucknutters.